In today's video, we will be reviewing testimony from trial day 23. On the stand is continued testimony from Trooper Michael Proctor and Lieutenant Brian Tully. So let's get into it. Welcome back to Late Night Review. Today we start out with a new text string from Mr. Proctor and apparently 8 people from high school. So within these messages, he was telling them about the investigation less than 24 hours after John was found dead. One of his friends said, "I'm sure the owners of the house will receive some shit." And Mr. Proctor responded and said, quote, "No, homeowners, a Boston cop too," end quote. Jackson told Mr. Proctor, basically, in no shape or form were you going to be implicating an officer for John's death. Mr. Proctor agreed with that. Michael Proctor went on to state that he knew he wasn't going to receive any shit for the death because he knew the Alberts had nothing to do with John's death, even though it's only been 16 hours since they found John dead. This is what Michael Proctor is saying. He knew that the reason why they weren't going to be receiving any shit for this was because that they had nothing to do with John's death. Within 16 hours. Basically, Mr. Jackson was saying, you had already figured out who killed John, and you were wrapping up the case less than 16 hours after finding John dead.
Assume you guys are out to make it cut and dry since it involved cops, correct?
Yes.
And Bird writes, something stinks, correct?
Correct.
And then Trooper Proctor, you responded, yeah, but there will be some serious charges brought on the girl. Isn't that right?
That's right.
So in that text exchange, you were saying, yeah, we're out to make it cut and dry, correct?
No.
You didn't write, yeah, we're going to follow the evidence wherever it takes us. You didn't, did you?
I did not write that.
You didn't write, yeah, we're going to make sure that we investigate this thing fully and thoroughly before making any decisions. You didn't say that, did you?
I did not.
You wrote, yeah, but there will be some serious charges brought on the girl, right?
And Michael Proctor said, yes, it was cut and dry, wrapped up within 16 hours. Never mind the fact that he didn't bother to investigate or look in the Alberts' home where John was invited to the night before. In his messages, Michael had actually stated that he thought that John had been beaten up. So let's take a look at that footage.
Then I saw the guy, correct?
Correct.
So what you meant by that, Trooper Proctor, was according to you, based on your conversations, your initial conversations with the paramedics, the first responders, you were under the impression that this was a beating death. He'd been beaten to death, correct?
The way it was given to me, sir, was
That's yes
for
or no?
medical.
That's yes or no?
He's going to answer the question. If you want to withdraw the question, you can.
No, go ahead.
We entered this investigation with an open mind. It was given to me as a medical situation. And when we saw Mr. O'Keefe's body at the hospital with Sergeant Buchanan and I, we saw his injuries and we were kind of working through how these injuries occurred.
As a matter of fact, both you and Sergeant Buchanan believed that he had suffered the injuries as a result of a physical altercation based on information you received from the paramedics initially, correct?
Initially, we didn't know what we had. We knew there was some significant injuries to Mr. O'Keefe. And we're still figuring out how those injuries occurred.
Well, you just testified. Initially, we didn't know what we had.
Right.
But 16 hours after the fact, you wrote the following sentence. That's what I initially thought after talking to Canton paramedics, correct?
Correct.
So initially, you did think you knew what you had, a physical altercation leading to a death, correct?
Correct.
His friend said, okay, so what's the story? And Michael Proctor said, she hit him with her car, and in the next message said, intentional or not. Let's take a look at that footage.
5051 writes, oh, Jesus. And Bird writes, okay, that's fucked up, correct?
Correct.
And then you wrote what?
Intentional or not.
Intentional or not. Is that right?
Yes.
Your word.
Correct.
0095 then chimes in, gotcha. He was frozen in the driveway and she didn't see him? Question mark. Correct?
Correct.
And you wrote what?
That's another animal we won't be able to prove.
That's another animal we won't be able to prove. Correct?
Correct.
Trooper Proctor, you knew that there were going to be things in this case even 16 hours into this, that you just admitted you would have zero proof of, correct?
Objection.
Sustained. You can ask it differently.
Did you mean by that statement that this was one of several things that you knew we would not be able to prove?
That statement, that's another animal we won't be able to prove, references the intentional or not plot.
And so within 16 hours of his investigation, he went on to state, quote, "Zero chance she skates. She's fucked," end quote. We have a pretty good indication or idea why he said that. Because he was going to pin it on her. That's why she was fucked. Zero chance she skates. When just messages before he's saying intentional or not. Let's take a look at some video footage of this disgusting Trooper Proctor on February 2nd, 2022, going on calling Karen names.
I responded, "Yeah, she's a babe. Weird Fall River accent, though. No ass."
Yeah, she's a babe. Who's the she?
Miss Reed.
Weird Fall River accent, though. You talking about her, the way she talks?
The accent.
And no ass. Now you're talking about her body, her physique, correct?
Yes.
Doc writes, "Is that chick a smoke?" Correct?
Correct.
Who's the chick?
Miss Reed.
And you write E-H, right?
Yes.
And then you write nutbag, as Chief would say, correct?
Correct.
Who's Chief?
A friend of mine.
And then you write what?
She's got a leaky balloon knot.
Trooper Proctor, explain to the jurors what a balloon knot is.
Your, essentially, I guess, your rectum area.
Your anus?
Yes.
That's what you were referring to about Miss Reed?
Yes.
And you were making fun of her because you believed at that time that it leaked? That's how you were treating Miss Reed? Yes or no?
Yes.
And then you followed that up just to make sure you cleared up any mistake about what you meant with leaks poo, correct?
Objection.
All right, so I'm going to strike that. You could get this in, but do it the right way, Mr. Jackson.
You followed that up with the phrase leaks poo, didn't you?
I did.
Again, another reference to Miss Reed's medical issues and medical conditions, correct?
Correct.
Guzzling on, correct?
Yes.
And you wrote nothing, writing a warrant. Is that right?
Correct.
Why did you then share some sort of a video, correct?
I don't recall the video he sent.
0095 laughed and then wrote, "Wait, why does her asshole leak?" Correct?
Yes, that's what he wrote.
And then what did Doc write in response to that?
Objection, Your Honor.
The objection sustained. I'll see it. Sidebar, take that down, please.
Mr. Proctor knew the Alberts and even had Julie Albert watching his son at one point. But at no point in any report of his did he mention that he knew the Alberts personally. Yet, him and Mr. Buchanan interviewed Julie and Chris Albert. Conflict of interest, in my opinion. Trooper Proctor said he talked to his sister Courtney about the case since she was friends with the Alberts. So he claims he doesn't know the Alberts personally, that they're friends with his sister Courtney. However, he's having Julie Albert watch his son. I guess they trust their children to anybody, apparently. Michael Proctor also stated that he was aware that Colin Albert was at the home of 34 Fairview that night, the night in question, but did not reflect it in any of his reports because he believed the witness to be truthful and honest and didn't see a need to report that Colin didn't see a need to report that Colin was at the home. He also didn't bother to check Allie McCabe's phone or her whereabouts to see if she was where she told them she was. I don't know if you remember, but Allie was the one that picked up Colin from the house from 34 Fairview that night. So he didn't bother to check to see if she was telling the truth using that app or any other means to check to see if like her phone was pinging off certain towers. There was no checking to see if this information was true. Michael Proctor deemed this witness to be truthful and honest and had no need to put them in his report. Gee, I wonder why he felt that way. Interesting enough, the medical examiner ruled John's death could not be determined. Well, I guess she should have just talked to Michael Proctor, because he could determine that within hours. No medical training whatsoever. In lieu of that, Trooper Proctor got a message from Trooper DeCecco that the autopsy report said undetermined, and Michael Proctor's response to him via text was, quote, "Of course it's undetermined. She's a whack job," end quote. Who was he referring to as a whack job? He was referring to Dr. Scoribello, who is the medical examiner who did the autopsy on John's body. That's who he was referring to as the whack job. Why was he referring to her as a whack job? Well, maybe it's because she didn't give him the answer he wanted to validate his clean-cut, wrapped-up case.
This exact question in February of 2024 at another proceeding, and you indicated that you had never seen it in your entire career, correct? Your statement in February of 2024 under oath was you'd literally never seen that in any homicide you've ever worked, right?
Yes.
After she reached that conclusion, you discussed this with one of your colleagues about how you tried to put pressure on her to change her or alter her opinion, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow it. Is that
Right.
what you did?
Pressure? Absolutely not.
Let's turn to tab 12. Trooper DeCecco texted you, rookie move, not going into a meeting with the ME and getting that homicide determination, correct?
Yes.
How did you interpret that? Rookie move, not getting that homicide determination.
Knowing Trooper DeCecco, it's busting my chops and joking with me.
Because you see it as your job, you and Trooper DeCecco, to go in and get the homicide determination. That's your job, right?
Not at all, sir.
You're not looking so much for her opinion as looking to give her your opinion, right?
Absolutely not.
You responded, Yuri and I, who's Yuri?
Sergeant Buchanan.
Yuri and I had 2 conference calls with her, sent her numerous photos, etc. We laid out the entire case for her. That was your response, correct?
Yes.
You were explaining how much effort you went to try to get her to change your opinion to homicide, right?
Objection.
Mm-hmm.
No, not at all.
DeCecco then responds, not good enough. Should have had me and Jeff do it, right?
Yes, that was his response.
Busting your chops that you didn't meet the standard of getting her to change her mind to make it a homicide, right? That's what he was busting your chops about.
We would never try to change the mind of a medical examiner.
In front of the grand jury, Michael Proctor said it wouldn't have mattered what the medical examiner determined, because either way they were going to charge Karen. This is what he had already told the grand jury. It didn't even matter what the medical examiner had come up with. He was going to charge Karen Reed no matter what, which is really quite silly that he has the audacity to sit on the stand and continuously say how he just follows the facts. He collects the evidence and follows the facts. Well, here's a pretty big piece of evidence, and he blatantly is stating to the grand jury he didn't care what the autopsy report said. He was going to charge Karen. And during the interview process of him interviewing the witnesses, he was actively talking with the Canton Police Department, and specifically Kevin Albert, who is Brian Albert's brother. Brian Albert, the one where they found the body at his house in his front lawn. This is the individual Michael Proctor is actively talking with during interviewing these witnesses. He said he was aware that they should not have been communicating anything with the Canton Police Department because they had been removed from having anything to do with the investigation. But Michael was telling them who he was going to interview and where he was going to interview them, at the Canton Police Department. And not only that, he was asking Kevin Albert to set up these interviews with the witnesses. I understand his reasoning for this because he already had his conclusion on who he was going to charge. So it didn't matter any kind of protocol that he needed to take at that point. He had his suspect, he had his cut and dry clothes wrapped up case here. So now everything else is just, let's just get this done. It doesn't matter what anybody says. It doesn't matter who is involved at this point, even though they shouldn't be. We're just going to get this done because this is where I am headed. This is basically, everything else is just a formality at this point. And not only that, Kevin Albert also tells Michael Proctor, you are more than welcome to use the recording room here at the police station to interview these witnesses. Michael Proctor not only is, being in communication with Kevin Albert, Michael Proctor is also hanging out with Kevin. And at one point, the two of them were out drinking, and they drank so much that they got drunk. And Michael Proctor messaged Kevin Albert to tell him that he found Kevin Albert's police badge in his cruiser, in Michael Proctor's cruiser. Did Kevin Albert go, oh my gosh, thank you for finding that? No, his response was, did I take my gun? Which means they got so drunk that Kevin Albert clearly lost his police badge and can't even find his gun. Doesn't even know if he took it with him. And what does that mean? That means they were so drunk that not only were they drinking, they were drinking and driving. And not only drinking and driving, they were drinking and driving their police cruiser. Next, they questioned the time that they had seized Karen's vehicle. And apparently it was an complete incorrect time. And Michael Proctor stated this incorrect time over and over and over on different reports. The reason why they found out this was even the incorrect time was because apparently the Reeds had footage from cameras within their yard of when her vehicle was actually taken. And not only was it incorrect in report after report, it was also incorrect in affidavits by Michael Proctor. Now, the Sally Port is about 3 minutes away from 34 Fairview Street. And in the process of taking Karen's vehicle over to the Sally Port, they actually passed other facilities that they could have housed Karen's vehicle, but they chose not to. They chose to take it to the Sally Port, which was 3 minutes away from Brian Albert's home, or 34 Fairview Street. Michael Proctor claimed that it wasn't his decision to take the vehicle to the Sally Port at Canton PD, that it was somebody else and he doesn't know who it was. Conveniently. The footage from the Canton Police Department, from the outside footage, or the outside the police department footage, is missing an hour of time. So it goes from 5:08 p.m. to 5:50 p.m. Moving back to the ring video footage from John's house, we learned that actually somebody did have access to the footage besides John O'Keefe. And as prosecution had been wanting to lean towards was that it was Karen who had access to it. It turns out the person who had access to it was Michael Proctor. And how did he get access to it? He got access to it through the app, which was on John's cell phone. However, he claims that he never deleted any of the videos off of the Ring app, despite the footage of Karen arriving back to John's house at around 12:40 a.m. missing. So he reviewed the footage, but he also had Officer DeChecco review the footage. And in Officer DeChecco's review, he noted that he saw brake lights at 12:41 a.m. and assumed it was Karen's vehicle pulling back into the garage. But this video footage is missing. Yet, Michael Proctor claims he didn't delete anything. And he also goes on to claim that he doesn't know why Officer DeChecco stated that he saw Karen's brake lights and that he didn't put a date on it, so he doesn't know what DeChecco was referring to. Oh, brother. So what, he couldn't go ask him? Hey, what day did you notice this? Because I'm not seeing it when I reviewed the footage. More lies. With that, we actually finally ended testimony with Michael Proctor, and next on the stand is Brian Tully. We hardly ever get much information out of Mr. Lally's questioning. I feel like his questioning is more to be like, see, I have a case, versus here is the case. As a result of the way he questions and doesn't seem to give us much information, I don't think I'm alone when I say this, but I feel like this trial could have been wrapped up in like 13 days from opening to closing arguments. Lally drags out his questioning, and it's always like very uninformative. But I think he does it to distract the jury or like kind of confuse them to try to prove he has a case. And because of the way he questions, that was actually all I have to report about Lieutenant Tully for today. But I would imagine he will be back on the stand tomorrow, first thing. I want to thank everybody so much who's taken the time out of their day to send messages or write comments about my reviews. I love hearing from everybody. It gives me different perspectives, tells me I have some active viewers, and I want to thank you personally. I always try to reply to every comment. YouTube doesn't always notify me when I get a message, but I do my best to review messages and go back and catch ones that I didn't get notifications from. But I want to thank you all so much for taking the time out of your day to sending me a comment or asking me questions to clarify certain things. So with that, I will talk to you tomorrow for trial day 24. Have a good night.